Welcome to the Jill on Money Show. It's Sunday, December 1st. Wow, I can't believe it's December already, but here we are. And today we are continuing to focus on retirement with Christine Benz, the Director of Personal Finance and Retirement Planning for Morningstar. Her book, which is called How to Retire, is really a very interesting compilation of her interviews with some thought leaders. It's kind of bummed she didn't ask me to do that, but she did ask me to blurb it, and I did blurb it. So here is the second part of my interview with Christine Benz. Can you talk a little bit about what retirement, how important it is to have those social networks, maybe even more important than family? I'm not sure, but what's your view on that?
Yeah, I think family could be part of it, but a lot of research on happiness and life satisfaction points to two main things: who you love, who loves you. That is, at the end of the day, the things that contribute to whether people think they have had a successful life or not. And what you referenced, Jill, is very much a phenomenon. Laura Carstensen, who's head of the Stanford Center on Longevity, talks about how our social networks naturally do winnow down over time. But it's just as you said, that there's an element of self-selection going on there where we are perhaps shedding friends who are like good enough friends. And I think the example she gives would be like your kids' friends' parents, the people who you hung out with after the soccer game or track meet or whatever. They might have been perfectly fine people to hang out with. But when you think about that smaller group of people, when you leave meeting with them and you're kind of walking on air because you feel so understood and you felt like you've completely understood that other person, those are the relationships that we self-select into. And her point is that it's perfectly fine for us to do that, that we're choosing deeper, more meaningful relationships. We're cognizant that our time on this earth is fleeting. So we want to make sure that we're spending time where we have a good ROI with that time. But the point is to not let those networks get too small either, that inevitably there might be changes, people might die or move away. So you want to be constantly kind of backfilling that inner circle and also diversifying that friends network, that ideally you would not end up with a bunch of people who are just your age and who, you would have some younger friends in the mix, which
Listen, I just said this to my mother. I said, you need younger friends.
Yeah.
These old farts are bringing you down, because my mom is actually physically in very good shape, but some of her very closest friends are starting to be, I would say, like they're in that crossing into no-go in a pretty significant way. And she goes, I know, you're right. And it's funny because she took a friend of hers to go see an assisted living place. And her friend, who I think has like some osteoporosis issues, that like real walking issues. And that, I think that it sort of feels like I cannot be alone in my house anymore, but sort of walks into the assisted living, even the nice one that's, 11 or 12 grand a month for your one bedroom, and is like, oh my God, these people are like old and infirmed. And my mother said to me, it was a little depressing. I mean, what do I say to my mother? But you're going to be right there. But having younger friends would be very helpful. It's funny because like when my mother will go out with, say, someone in the family who's a little bit younger, she'll feel better. Not so much the grandchildren. It's not that. It's like younger friends, not necessarily like the kids I, babysat for.
Yeah, exactly. And, increasingly your mom, if she's the one in good shape, may be thrust into, more of a caregiver role for some of these friends herself, where she's, taking them to hair appointments and things like that. And that may not be where she wants to be. So yeah, ideally to try to find some connection point to younger people in your community. I think oftentimes this can be through volunteer activities, through some sort of sporting activity that you like to do, whatever it is. It is one reservation I have with like these continuing care retirement communities where you have all of these people of the same general age band living together. I think you're missing out on something, even though there's a lot to like about them from the standpoint of it being kind of holistic, life stage based care. I do think that maintaining connection points to people of different age groups is super important. And from a practical standpoint, for many of us, this is through our families, through our, children, grandchildren, if we have them, nieces,
Let me tell you what
nephews.
it's for me. I have a nice young executive producer like Mark Talercio.
Yeah.
Mark, don't forget, just wheel me into Riverside Park and I need some sun every so often. That'll be very nice for me. But it is true. I mean, like you have to, and also like a diversity of type of person. I think that's also kind of interesting that I noticed that, obviously after my father died 11 years ago. And then after that, my mother, like there were some new people who came into her life. And I think it's very enriching to have like new characters in your life story and people who maybe were very close previously, not as close. And it was just very interesting to see how the friend group starts to shift a little bit and what each person brings into it. I think that's, to me, an important part of this also. So, I mean, in writing the book, you do a lot of the investment stuff. I don't want to dwell on that so much because we talk about that all the time. I want to know, in writing this book for you, does this bring you closer to your own retirement game plan?
It does, Jill. And a couple of things I've been thinking about. One is that I've come to be a big believer in this idea of kind of phased retirement, where you are using the art of subtraction to, while you're still working, you're trying to guide your own activities and you're trying to get your work life more in the direction of the things that you enjoy, that you find agreeable. Ideally, those would line up with what your employer wants you to do. But I always urge people to do kind of the Sunday night calendar test, where you look at your calendar for the week ahead and you probably have some things on your calendar where you go, oh, all right, well, okay. And then you have things where you're like, oh, that's going to be a good day. And so ideally you want to get your work life shifting toward more of those things you enjoy and taking off the table some of the things that you don't enjoy. Inevitably, though, we get good at things that we don't love. And so your employer may resist you shifting away from those activities. So that's something that people have to navigate. So I would say look at the complexion of the work that you're doing, try to change up your work activities, and then you may want to shift your hours a little bit, downshift your hours, because 40 hours or however much you're working, that's a long time to give to an employer, or that's a big chunk of time. And so you may experiment with, a 30-hour work week or 20-hour work week, or maybe your work-life balance where you are moving to, full-time remote or whatever the case might be. And it, of course, depends on the type of work that people do. But I would start there, and that's something that I've been taking to heart in terms of my own work. This book project was something that I really wanted to work on, and had to shed some activities to make time for it. But something that I really wanted to do, and I'm pleased with the way that it came out. So that's one thing I've been thinking about.
And I love that other part with this was later in the book where it was Jamie Hopkins who wrote about being adaptable. And so like as you are doing this phased retirement, adapting to what like might present itself as an opportunity, and maybe pushing off something that might be interesting, but might have been more interesting 20 years ago. You know what I mean? Like my shiny object moment is always like creating something from nothing. I do love that. Right. And so, maybe at this point in my late 50s, I say, oh, you know what? I could create something from nothing, or I could kind of just like keep doing the podcast for a while. That's really fun. Maybe not do the new thing right now because it feels like that's a huge push. And that would require me to do something very different. And that would sort of, and I only know how to do that one way, which is like all in. So sometimes I think that the adaptability is also like you adapt to like, maybe that's not the smartest thing for this phase.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I have a close friend who recently retired, and she had been an executive at a very large company. And so this transition to retirement has been really difficult for her. And we've been having these conversations. And my point to her is she's meant to be a leader. It's clear to me that she's really missing that part of her work life. And so I'm like, okay, so you are totally over the whole corporate thing. I get it. But we need to figure out a way for you to lead something. I don't know what it is, but I think that people need to get creative where, maybe you're not, maybe you don't want part of the thing that you had at work at all.
Right.
But you're sort of thinking about who you are as a person and the things that you really value about yourself. How can you carry those things forward longer? So for you, it seems like even if you decide that this financial stuff isn't something you want to do long term, can you find a way to continue to create things? Because that seems to be the thing that you really love in some completely different dimension.
Right.
So I think sometimes people are too literal about what it means to continue their work longer, that maybe it's just a thread of yourself that you carry forward into the future.
So as you come to the all the publicity and you're talking about this, has your own ideas around retirement? I'm sure they've shifted, but has your game plan actually changed? Or do you have the game plan now that you're ready to implement?
I feel like my game plan is in pretty good shape. I'm going to be working more on my husband with this because I feel like he needs to articulate his vision for
what's
retirement.
His deal?
So he is very happy with his employment situation. I won't, he's very private, so I won't share the specifics of that, but
can't wait to hear this off air. Thank God. This is Greg.
Yes, that's right. So he's very involved with his work life as well as kind of his family, kind of the rock in his family, making sure that everything, the trains are all running on time there. And so I think we just have to think about a point in his life where he has other activities. And so, that'll be it's been something that I've been thinking about and talking to him about what his retirement vision is like, because I feel like that's a little maybe less articulated than it could be.
That's an interesting point, though. We do talk to tons of people where one person in the couple is like, I'm ready to be done. And the other's like, no way. Do you have a vision in terms of like, could you kind of have your plan and have him working for longer? Is that okay for you?
Yeah, that would be fine. I feel like I'm in a luxurious position of being able to really decide what my work life looks like, which I know doesn't apply to a lot of people. But yes, if he decides he wants to continue working, that's fine with me. The issue is if we want to travel or something like that, that can be an impediment if one person is, still full-time and the other is a little less encumbered. So that'll be something that we'll have to work through.
I mean, just dump him and you know what? He can keep working and you have your health insurance. It's all good. And then you travel, you find some travel friends. It'll be fantastic.
Well,
okay. In sum, give us the 3 things that you think are the biggest like mistakes of retirement. Like what are the things that we've blown, like that people these people are all have you've interviewed for this book. I mean, they've done such important work, but obviously you speak to people all the time about the people who blow it. So what do you think are the retirement mistakes that people make?
So a biggie, Jill, you mentioned is just focusing on the spreadsheets and the numbers and really underrating the non-financial aspects of retirement, like purpose and identity. So for people who are very steeped in the financial dimension, I think there's a tendency to get a little bit lost in all of that stuff.
Yep.
To take a step back and think about some of these big picture questions, sit down with your partner and, talk through them. You probably have different visions for what retirement will look like. So that's a big category. It's just underrating the financial. Longevity protection is another key one that I think people sometimes underrate, that yes, we have people who die earlier than they expected, but especially among wealthier people who have investment assets, they tend to be healthier and they have longer lives. And so underrating the value of maximizing lifetime income sources like Social Security, I think is a common trap. I frequently hear from investing types who say, hey, I'm going to take my Social Security early and invest, and I should be able to out earn the pickup and benefit that I get from delaying. But I think what they're underrating reiterating is that if you are able to inflate that eventual benefit, it's one of the only lifetime benefits that most of us will be bringing into retirement. So that, I think, is a key area where people stub their toes. And then finally, a smaller bore problem is long-term care planning, which we've kind of touched on in this conversation. But it's the elephant in the room, frankly, from the standpoint of retirement planning, in that there are no good answers for long-term care planning. Unfortunately, people who thought they were doing all the right things, who have purchased long-term care insurance, have in some cases been confronted with these staggering premium increases or difficulties getting the insurance company to pay up. And then, of course, people who have not opted for insurance have had to figure out, well, how much do I need to set aside for this? So if your plan is not to buy insurance, and I get why you would want to avoid long-term care insurance, the point is that you need to create what is your long-term care plan in that case. And I'm a big believer in the idea of kind of hiving off some pool of your investment assets that you would use to cover long-term care costs. You're sort of segregating them from your spendable retirement assets. So those are three things that I run into a lot.
If there's something going on in your life that you need a little bit of help with, maybe a little nudge, or maybe you just need a little kind of positive feedback, we are here for you. Both Mark and I are certified financial planners. We'd love to help you out. Just go to jillonmoney.com, click the Contact Us button, and don't forget to check the box if you'd like to join us on the air live. While you're on the website, check out all the content that lives there. We've got a blog, we've got videos and resources, all sorts of fun stuff right there at jillonmoney.com. You can subscribe to us on the Odyssey app or wherever you find your favorite podcast. Please lift someone up today. Change your work, change your wealth, change your life. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.